Hi, my name is Emily and this is my channel, The Redheaded Ravenclaw. Today I'm going to be doing my October wrap-up and there are 19 books I'm going to talk about, so I'm going to try to do this as fast as I possibly can. I'm going to do it a little bit differently than I've done my wrap-ups before, so I'm going to start with the book I read for class, then I'm going to talk about the book that we read for my faculty staff book club, and then I'm going to talk about the manga I read, and then we'll talk about the regular novels that I read. And if you're wondering, yes, I do still have my Halloween decorations up, because in my house it is Halloween until Thanksgiving, so please enjoy the leftover spoops on my walls / bookshelf. So anyways, let's get right into it. A lot of the books that I read for class I don't rate, unless, I think I've talked about this before, but unless the book was already like on my radar, already something that I wanted to read, I generally don't rate it unless it just like really impacts me. So the first book that I read this month for my class that I did not rate was Esperanza Rising by Munoz. Munoz, that's a little hard to say altogether. Anyways, Esperanza Rising is about a girl named Esperanza, and she is very privileged. She lives on a ranch in Mexico, and her family has these servants, and they're very well off, but then her father is killed by bandits, and so she and her mother have to flee Mexico in order to avoid her mother being forced into a marriage of convenience. And so they immigrate to the United States, and Esperanza has to quickly check her privilege because she has to work in order to survive now, and things are just a lot different. And I really liked the discussion of privilege, and I liked to be able to see the hardships that come with immigrating. This is a historical fiction book. I think it's set during the Great Depression, and so it was really well written. I think it's targeted towards a middle grade audience, and overall it was really good, but I didn't rate it just because I didn't have any like strong feelings towards giving it a number rating. The next book that I read for a class that I didn't rate is called Under the Mesquite by Guadalupe, Garcia, McCall. This book is about Lupita, and Lupita is one of 9 children, and she is the oldest, and she and her family live on a border town, so they go back and forth between Mexico and the US, specifically Mexico and Texas. And one day they find out that Lupita's mom is diagnosed with cancer, and so while she is going to get treatments and things like that, Lupita has to assume a lot of responsibilities as the oldest child, and she has to just essentially become the caretaker for all of her siblings, and all the while she's trying to finish high school and trying to find herself, find out who she is outside of her family, and it's a really difficult time for her. The story is very moving, especially dealing with the loss of a loved one, and it's told in verse, and so it was impactful because of the verse and because Lupita uses writing as a way to escape from her responsibilities and things like that, and so it was also enjoyable aside from being sad, but again, I didn't rate that one either. The next book that I did not rate for my class was a book called Jingle Dancer by Cynthia Leitich Smith, and the other 2 were for the Hispanic unit or the Latinx unit. This book and the next one I'm going to talk about this one, and you'll see in a second, are about or from the Native American unit that we did next. And Jingle Dancer is a picture book about this girl named Jenna who wants to dance in the next powwow for her tribe, but in order to do so she has to find jingles for her dress. And there goes into an explanation about the importance of the jingles on the dresses and what the significance of them are for their traditional dresses for their powwows. And so Jenna goes around her neighborhood talking to her family and neighbors about borrowing some jingles, and it's a really awesome picture book because it shows Native Americans in a modern setting, because Native Americans are stereotypically held in the past and held as part of history and not included in the modern time period. And so this picture book shows her cousin has a job in a law firm, and they live in an intertribal community where they live in modern housing, and they really only wear their traditional like tribal wear for powwows and ceremonies. And so it was a really interesting look into that culture for Jenna's specific tribe. Again, I did not rate that one. I usually don't rate picture books. Another book that I did not rate was a book that I read for my youth programming class for a story time project I had to do. It was called Leaf Man, and I can't remember the author off the top of my head, but I'll insert a picture here and put the name of the author in the description below. But it was just for a little craft project I had to do, and it was a story about the leaves changing and moving and things like that. The next book that I did not rate that was also for the Native American unit is Code Talker by Joseph Bruchac, and this is a fictionalized retelling of the Navajo Marines that became code talkers in World War II. And it follows the story of one man. His name is Ned Begay, and he was not a real person, but most of the other people, the other characters that were in the book were real people. And the story is told as if Ned is retelling his time during the war and growing up as a Navajo to his grandchildren. And I really enjoyed that format, and I think it lent to the storytelling really well. And I listened to the audiobook, and there are a lot of Navajo words and phrases used in the book because that is, a big part of what the story is about, as, the code talkers used their Navajo language to be able to stump the Japanese. The Japanese were unable to crack the code that they created, and it's a very difficult story to read because the Navajo were very oppressed. The teachers at their boarding schools that they went to in order to learn English essentially tried to erase Navajo culture from their lives. And it wasn't until they were recruited into the Marines that they were able to really be themselves and appreciate their culture again and just openly express their culture. And so, and obviously it's a story about war, so there are some, difficult topics around that, but it was a really good book, and I liked it a lot, even though I didn't give it a rating. It was interesting and enlightening, and I really like seeing alternate sides of history because we get a lot of stories about World War I from the German side, and we don't hear as much about the helping hands that really changed things and impacted history that are marginalized people and things like that. So it was a very interesting book. Okay, now we're getting into the books that I read for class that I did give ratings to. And the first one was a graphic novel called Lowriders to the Center of the Earth by Cathy Camper and illustrated by Raul III. And this is a really great graphic novel about these 3 friends who own a body shop, and I think it's like the story is set in Mexico. I'm not 100% sure about that, but they work at this body shop, and each of them has their own special abilities. And one day their cat goes missing, and so the 3 friends really love their cat, and they decide to go out and try to find him. Well, they end up running into some Aztec gods and have to fight to get their cat back and go on this crazy mission. And it was a really, really fun and interesting graphic novel. Like, the concept was super interesting. The artwork was really cool as well. The colors were really only like red, black, a little bit of green, I think, and blue. And so it was interesting to see what the artist was able to do with that. And I think the coolest thing is that there were a lot of Spanish words and phrases intermixed in with the English, and each time a Spanish word or phrase was used, there was an asterisk, and at the bottom of the page they would define it and put it into context. And as someone who took several years of Spanish in high school and college, I was able to, pretty easily understand what the context and what the words were, because they were usually pretty simple terms, but then when there was one that was a little bit obscure or like more of a slang term, it was nice to have the asterisk to see, what it meant for this particular, setting or whatever. And it was really funny. This happens to be the 2nd volume in a series of graphic novels, but for this class we just had to read the 2nd volume. But I definitely plan on going back and reading the other volumes because I really, really loved it, and I ended up giving it 5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read and rated for my class was for our inclusive literature unit, and it was Ivy Aberdeen's Letter to the World by Ashley Herring Blake. And I've been meaning to read this book for a really long time. I've been really excited about it, and so I was super excited to see it on our list of choices for the inclusive unit. And I was so moved by this book. If you don't know, it's about a young girl named Ivy, and she and her family's home is destroyed by a tornado. And in the midst of the chaos and stuff like that, Ivy loses her notebook that contains drawings that she wants to keep secret. And the reason she wants to keep them secret is because in all of the drawings, she's holding hands with a girl, and she's realizing that she likes girls and that she, she doesn't know how to tell people about her feelings. And one day when she goes back to school, her drawings start showing up in her locker with notes attached to them. And so she's trying to figure out how to deal with her feelings, how to get her notebook back, who's doing this, and also just like dealing with the stress and tension of she and the 5 other members of her family living together in a 1-bedroom hotel room at this point while they're waiting on their house to get rebuilt and insurance claims to come through and all that kind of stuff. And this book was so touching and difficult to read. Ivy is feeling really neglected by her family because they have infant twins, and her older sister and her are fighting over something that happens, and she just feels like her parents aren't noticing her, and she's trying to cope with all of these feelings and her house being gone, and having a crush on a girl. And it was such a powerful book. This is a middle grade novel, and I think that it will really impact a lot of young people for many years to come. And if you can't tell by me gushing about it, I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and it destroyed me. I cried so much that I had a headache the next day after I read it. If you want to see me crying over it, you can watch, I think it's my October Vlogs 5. 5 or 6, but anyways, I was a mess, and I loved it, and I think it will be a book that I will reread in the future, and yeah, it was great. The last book that I read for my class that I ended up rating this month was Words on Bathroom Walls by Julia Walton. This book is about Adam, and he has early onset schizophrenia. And if you don't know, for males, schizophrenia generally presents itself in the mid to late 20s. And Adam is 16 in this book. And so he is participating in a study for a new medication that will hopefully help him be able to manage his hallucinations. And at the same time, the story is told through Adam's journal entries to his therapist, because he doesn't like to verbally talk to his therapist, but he's cool with writing to his therapist. And the story just goes through Adam's day-to-day life, really experiencing hallucinations, both auditory and visual. And it is a really difficult story because Adam thinks he's kind of getting a grip on his situation and starting to be able to control his hallucinations, and then some things happen and he starts to go downhill again. And it's a story of finding how to manage your mental health situations. And there's also stories of friendship and first love and family, and it was a really, really good book. I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars, and I think it had a really good discussion of mental health. My one big hang up with this book is that Adam frequently refers to himself as crazy, and in most contexts, crazy is a derogatory term, and I'm unsure of whether it's problematic because Adam is calling himself crazy, and so it made me feel a little icky, but like I would recognize that it was a problem if he was calling somebody else crazy, if they were dealing with the same thing, but since it's himself, I'm not really sure. But just be aware of that if you are interested in reading this book and that is something that impacts you or affects you. Okay, so now that we're done with books that I read for class, I'm going to talk about the book that we read for our faculty staff book club really, really fast. It is called How We Got to Now by Stephen Johnson, and it is about the 6 innovations that brought us to the modern world. It talks about sound, cold, glass, and I can't remember the other 3 right off the top of my head, and those may sound like just concepts rather than like innovations, but it's about how like developing those things into other things change the world. For instance, like harvesting ice and taking it to places that are really hot eventually ended up in like getting frozen foods and like air conditioning in houses and things like that, and how glass being developed, like the printing press has a part in glass, and like getting spectacles developed, and then like microscopes and things like that that further developed science and progressed reading and all of these things. So it was interesting, and we had a really good conversation, like a discussion about it. I didn't end up rating it because it was just so to me. It didn't really impact me. It was just, kind of whatever. But I read it and I talked about it. Okay, now I'm going to quickly talk about the 5 volumes of manga that I read. And just as a reminder, I don't go into details about My Hero Academia. I just give the ratings in these, and then eventually I will catch up with my in-depth reviews. I've still only done 1, but I was doing my whole vlogging project in October and I didn't have time to do any, so I'm planning on doing at least one, maybe 2 this month, and eventually we'll get caught up. But I read 5 volumes, and I talked a lot about this. I read up to the point where season 3 of the anime ends, so I am like watching season 4 of the anime as it comes out, and then after I finish season 4, then I'll read the next set of manga. So I read volume 10, which I gave 5 stars. Volume 11 was 4 stars. Volume 12 was 4 stars. Volume 13 was 4 stars. And volume 14 was 4 stars. I really enjoyed all of those volumes, and it was really interesting to see the tiny little changes and little things that are different in the manga versus the anime, and especially like because part of volume 14 is like where season 3 ends, but then part of it has early parts of season 4 in it. And so reading that before I knew what was going to happen in the anime was kind of like, I don't know what to do with myself, but I love this series so much. I talk all the time about it. I talk all the time about how much I love it, and I made a friend over on Halloween that also is obsessed with My Hero Academia, and we gushed for like 45 minutes about our favorite characters and all this stuff, and it just makes me happy. Like, you can't stop smiling when I talk about this series, so I'm excited to continue doing the in-depth reviews, and I'll talk more about it later, but yeah, those were my ratings for those. Okay, now on to the normal novels, whatever, that I read just for funsies. And I had a whole big plan to read a bunch of books from my physical TBR that were like spooky for October, and then all of this reading for school really messed that up. But I did read some, and the first book that I read, that I'm going from lowest rated to highest rated for these, and the first one, and unfortunately my least favorite thing I read in October, is 17 and Gone by Nova Ren Suma. This is about a girl named Lauren, and she becomes obsessed with finding this girl whose missing poster she finds, and the girl starts appearing to her, and she thinks that it's the girl appearing to her as a ghost or like a spirit somehow. And then as she finds more clues and more, like, gets more in depth with the search, other missing girls start appearing to her. And my problem with this book is that it was pitched as a paranormal thriller, which I was really, really excited about. I love paranormal books. I love ghost stories. Like, that's my jam. But spoiler alert, this book in the last 50 to 75 pages actually becomes a book that uses mental health as a plot twist, which is just not cool. And what happens is that Lauren is experiencing a schizophrenic episode and seeing these missing girls and things like that. I have a problem with this because using mental health as a plot twist or as a device is harmful, and I don't agree with it that it was pitched as a paranormal, and all the way up until the last 50 or 75 pages, it was like, that's what it seemed to be. And like, this book took me forever to read. If you watch my spooky season vlogs, you'll see that. And I go more into depth about the problems I had with this there, but I just was frustrated that that's what it ended up being. The one like good thing about it though is that in the back of the book, in the author's note, Nova Ren Suma does like include hotlines and resources for like the National Mental Illness Alliance and other resources that you can reach out, and talks about the seriousness of schizophrenia and things like that. So I can give her credit for like linking people who read this to those resources, but using schizophrenia as a plot twist, it just wasn't cool and it made me uncomfortable. So I gave this book 2 out of 5 stars. The next book I read, I've been wanting to read for a while, but I don't know why I haven't picked it up, but then a coworker was telling me how good it was, and I finally decided to just listen to the audiobook, and that was Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. And this is about Stevie, and Stevie is obsessed with true crime, and not only is she obsessed with it, but she's like actually really good at solving mysteries and things. And so she goes to this private school that was started in the 1930s, and a mysterious thing happened to the owner of the school's family, and there was a murder that happened that went unsolved. And so now in present day, Stevie is going to the school in order to try to solve the murder. And once she gets there and starts, going through school and things like that, one of her classmates gets murdered. And so she's also trying to solve the present day murder as well as trying to figure out what happened in the 30s. And I really, really liked this book. I was surprised that I was unable to guess the plot twists and things like that. And I feel like it was a little bit tropey, but I didn't mind, and I really liked Stevie. It's a really diverse story. There's a non-binary character, there's people of color. Stevie has severe anxiety and she takes medicine for it. There's a lot of good representation, and I am really excited to continue on with the series. I need to pick up The Vanishing Stairs soon, and the 3rd book comes out early next year. But yeah, I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars, and I really enjoyed it. Okay, now we've got 2 more, and they're both 5 stars. The first one was Before the Devil Breaks You by Libba Bray, and I listened to the audiobook, and as you know, if you have been watching my videos, I have been participating in the Diviners read-along, but somehow I missed the one for Before the Devil Breaks You, and I still wanted to read it because it was October, it was going to be spooky, and I was really excited to continue the series after reading, the other 2 in the 2 previous months. And oh my gosh, this book was so good. The stakes raised so much in this book. And I finally got more of Memphis's story. I talked about how I thought that Layer of Dreams was going to be more information about Memphis, but we finally got it in Layer of Dreams. We got more information about Jericho, even more information about Sam and his mom's past, and I think the best part is that we got more ghosts, because I think this one really stepped up the spookiness. And I talked about this in my vlogs, but I was anticipating there to be a character death in this book. There hadn't really been any in the first 2, and so I just knew something was gonna happen. And I'm not gonna spoil anything, but oh my gosh. But yeah, it was really good. I really liked where it's going, and I can't believe I have to wait till February for The King of Crows. I thought that it would be coming out sooner, since the Diviners read-along was happening 1 month at a time. I was hoping it would come out in December, but no, we have to wait until February. But I really, really liked it. The audiobooks are so good. And yeah, I give it 5 out of 5 stars. And the final book that I read in October and gave 5 stars was Mooncakes by Wendy Zhu and Suzanne Walker. I loved this. It was great. It was just what I needed for October. I pre-ordered it and it came in at just the right time. Mooncakes is about Nova, who is a witch, and she lives in a bookstore / coffee shop with her 2 grandmas, And one day she hears about this like evil presence in their town, and she goes to see what it is, and she runs into her former friend Tam, and Tam is a non-binary werewolf, and they just rekindle their friendship and work towards fighting this evil presence that is in their town. And they slowly, well, actually it's not really that slow, but they end up falling for each other, and it's so cute. The artwork is gorgeous, the color is amazing. I saw so many people with arcs of this talking about how excited they were to see it fully colored in, and I'm really glad that I didn't have to like wait and see like part of it in just black and white. Like, I'm so glad that I got to see all of it in color. And this book deals with some surprisingly dark topics, like loss of a loved one, questioning yourself and your identity. I'm sure there's other things, I just can't remember off the top of my head, but it was a beautiful story. Overall, it's heartwarming and it's very cute. And I've heard a lot of people talk about how there's not really that much plot to this, and I think they're right, but I think overall the aesthetics and the like romance and the friendship is plenty and is more than enough, and it just made me smile a lot and made me really happy. I love how diverse it was in terms of just like, there's a non-binary character, Nova is hard of hearing, there's Fat Rep, I think there is people, like, I'm not sure if Tam is a person of color, but I think there might be other person of color rep, I'm not 100% sure about that, but it was just great, and I loved it, and yeah, I'll definitely like reread this in the future for spooky months, but yeah, 5 out of 5 stars for this one. Okay guys, that is my October wrap up. I've been talking forever, and I know 19 books is a lot to talk about and listen to me talk about, but I tried to be fast and concise. I can't believe I read 19 things in October, but now that I'm done with reading for school for those specific units, I will have a unit this month, I'm pretty sure, but I should be able to like read it faster, because last unit, like for the Native American and inclusive units, we had to read 6 books instead of 4 because there were 2 units combined. But anyways, I am hopeful that I'll be able to read more things for fun, and yeah, hopefully I will also be able to get out more videos. I haven't filmed in front of my bookshelves in forever because I was doing that October vlogging project, and I'm really glad to be done with that. I'm really glad I did it and did that whole month of vlogging, but I'm excited to be getting back to different content, and I'm planning on doing some tags and some manga in-depth reviews like I was talking about. But anywho, that's all for now. I'm gonna go drink some water because I can tell my throat is like scratchy and tired of talking, but I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!